morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners agenda setting for Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. It's 9:02 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier. We have Commissioner Emily Klaus on Zoom and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder. We're here till 12. We'll have a midpoint break. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. First up this morning is a housing update. And I see Keely Marino from Public Health and Social Services. Good morning, Keely.
Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino here with update. So starting this morning off with the right-of-way or encampment relocation program. At this point, Maple Court still has 6 rooms available for people to move in. Last week, they moved 5 people from the Desmond property, 3 from the Lacey list, and 2 from the OLIMAP list or Olympia Mutual Aid Partner list. So a total of 5. There's still 3 people that are staying at Desmond that are on Lacey's original list, and about 3 to 4 other folks on OLIMAP's list. So there's approximately 7 more people that are needing to be moved. The Code of Conduct also was updated for Maple Court and I believe implemented, the changes predominantly being around case management as a requirement rather than a suggestion or an optional part of that program. What I do know also is that there was a question that had come out during the Regional Housing Council about the folks on the list for Desmond. And what I understand is that the lists were cross-referenced in multiple places with multiple providers, and there's a pretty consistent or pervasive understanding that anyone who was living at Desmond did get on a list with a maybe there's no way to know 100% for sure, but anyone who was at Desmond is either on the the Lacey by name list or the OLIMAP list. Secondly, related to the encampment relocation program, there is part of that is the purchase of a hotel by Interfaith Works in Olympia. That hotel is set to close on March 15th. They're waiting to hear just get a response from the seller regarding some questions that Interfaith Works has, but they intend it to go fine and for them to close on the 15th. They have asked the seller to take responsibility for relocating any tenants that are there. After the purchase, there's also a live-in manager that is there on the property currently, and so Interfaith Works has tasked the seller with making a plan for relocating those long-term residents that are currently in the hotel. In terms of rehab, they are looking to build a community kitchen. There's back-of-house laundry facilities. They're aiming to rehab and build front-of-house laundry facilities. And then there's a presidential suite that they're going to be turning into offices. They have construction all lined up to start in April. They are also aimed to start meth remediation at the end of March after the close. If everything goes well, they anticipate move in around July 1st of this year. And finally, at the beginning of February, there was concern that was voiced to our department around a tiny home village and potentially biohazard or MRSA on the property, impacting both staff and residents. So they reached out to public health. So the disease control and prevention team and our team were in communication around and environmental health around how to address the concern and to go out and make sure all was well. That turned into also a collaboration with Department of Health. So the infection control and response team with Department of Health partnered with the DCP team to go and do a site visit last Friday on the 1st of March. So the Department of Health Regional Medical Officer, Jay Miller, was one of those in attendance to walk through the tiny home village. It was there weren't any concerns about the report came back great. Franz Anderson is in really good shape, and they met with the director there to assure that all was well. And from that, what's really exciting is that there's a proposal on the table to have ongoing collaboration between the tiny home villages and public health, both the state and our office, to address any public health concerns when it comes to tiny home villages in our community. That's Quinn Street Village, New Hope Village, and Franz Anderson. And so what it looks like is potentially like a monthly meeting to at each of the villages, because there are meetings that happen in those locations for education and outreach around hygiene, MRSA, what is respiratory illnesses, et cetera. And then public health would kind of take the lead in setting up those meetings with those tiny home villages and their staff, and then hopefully expand into community meetings at the encampments that are still remaining. So really exciting collaborative possibility there. And that's my report.
Questions for Keely? Commissioner Fournier?
Kaylee, you talked about meth remediation, and I've been, since we kind of learned about the low barrier shelter concept, I've been wondering, you have to do the meth remediation when you take over a structure before you allow other people to come in. Are considerations for meth remediation given when you transfer from one resident to another resident within a place like Maple Village? Because if resident A is using methamphetamines and then you transfer it and you bring another person in, do you not have to remediate for that previous meth user's contamination of that room before another person comes in?
Yeah, I can answer that in part. I think that our public health officer would be able to answer that a little bit more fully. But what I can say is that the Department of Commerce, in their contracts for any kind of asset development, or not development, but rehab of any pre-existing property, is that we must perform meth remediation, testing and remediation on any property that we are acquiring through commerce funding. And that it ends there. There's nothing in the contract language that says that testing needs to be ongoing. And I know that there are conversations at Department of Health around that. Like, why are we doing testing once and not testing again? But again, that's as far as my knowledge goes. It's just that in our contract with Commerce, it's only required one time.
Okay, so when it transfers ownership, there's a requirement, but it's not, it's up in the air whether if somebody contaminates a room with methamphetamines, if that's an issue for the next resident to come in, that's still just kind of something we don't know about.
Well, I would say that anytime that a room turns over, staff or the agencies that are operating the program in that building do a thorough cleaning. So I don't know what would be required in between, like transferring a room. If there was active meth use in that room, that's not in my wheelhouse, so I don't know what that might look like. But I do know that every agency does a thorough assessment and cleaning of whatever unit is being evacuated for the new person before the new person moves in.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'd be curious, what the procedures are. If if meth abatement's a real big issue, I don't, chemicals are chemicals, whether it's transferring ownership or one person moving in a room to another. My thoughts.
Commissioner, this is David Bain. We can get a conversation going with Dr. A and you about the details of remediation.
Thank you.
I didn't get that last, what was the last part of that answer?
He would get details to us about the details of remediation requirements. If there are any, or if there aren't any, we need to know that as well. Because that could bear on how the code of conduct ought to look, for example.
Yeah, that's my concern, that we endorse the use of toxic chemicals, and then that person that's the user leaves. Now a new person steps into that position, and if we don't do adequate cleaning, then we're subjecting that individual that we're trying to help to those same toxic chemicals. And so I understand the concern.
The whole meth remediation and meth abatement thing is a new concept to me in the prior to a year ago, I didn't know that that was even a thing, and, you know, I buy it. Methamphetamines are disgusting chemicals that are used to, you know, cooked in certain ways, and, you know, if, you know, that new liability came up, I would imagine that you know, you follow the trap line and it goes down from user to user at some point, and, you know, are there liability issues that we're not aware of yet?
So David will set up a time with Dr. A to get some greater clarity around that. It definitely has the potential for operational impacts of the cost of operating.
Is council in attendance at this meeting? There'd
Well,
be a
we have,
good question
we
for
have
him to
counsel
find that out.
on here, but not necessarily counsel for this particular topic.
Okay.
Okay, there's no other questions for Keely. Not seeing any. Thank you. Move forward. Habitat Conservation Program update is next up. Brett Burris, morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brett Burris, Development Services Manager for Community Planning and Economic Development. You have all been provided the Thurston County Board of Commissioners HCP update. This data is updated as of March 1st, 2024. Per the direction of the Board of County Commissioners, we have separated the year 2023 and providing data ongoing through 2024. For 2024 data, you can see that we have received 32 HCP applications. Apps to be reviewed at this time are 21. Applications reviews complete are 11. And of those 32, fees paid and a certificate of occupancy issued is 5. Properties that avoided or excluded, which is 1. And applications with payments pending is 5. And in the matrix down below, these are the application service areas that we have conducted our HCP reviews for. And for 2024, you can see that there are approximately 23 applications that were part of Olympia Pocket Gopher, Yom Pocket Gopher East, Yom Pocket Gopher North, Yom Pocket Gopher South, and Orchid Spotted Frog screening. Please note that these numbers do not align with the actual numbers because some projects had multiple service areas. And as of 2024, March 1st, HCP mitigation fees are approximately $13,367. And I'm available for any questions.
Commissioner Mejia. Commissioner Mejia? See your hand?
Still on mute?
How about if we give her a break and I'll ask?
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards. I'll come back to you, Commissioner.
First of all, I want to thank you and your folks for making all this happen over, it took us, 10 years to get here.
Approximately 10 years, yeah.
And it was not an easy task. But I am curious about one thing, and maybe maybe my seatmates might feel this might be important. When they designated the subspecies of the Mazama pocket gopher, how did they designate, because I can't recall any discussions about this, between the Yelm East, North, and South? What was the criteria that they used? Was it a DNA test or was it a physical anomaly?
The young ones have pointy ears. East ones have a curly tail.
It is about that bad, and I don't believe they ever did really come up with anything. I'd just like to have something, I've been asked by a constituent, what is the difference? I'd like to be able to say, well, it's a DNA issue. One of them's got a fat tail and the other one doesn't. I don't know the answer to it. I hate to tell people that I don't know. And so I'm asking that question. Maybe you could get back to us some point? Just give us an idea of what that is.
Thank you. I don't like to say I don't know either, but in this case, I don't know.
couldn't
I'd have to
imagine.
get back to you.
Fish and Wildlife will send a biologist to come and meet with us. And you can ask, I would love to sit here and listen to you ask all the questions.
It just seems like probably a logical way of breaking down a larger service area into smaller service areas potentially.
Well, it puts a drain on the citizens, though, when they're faced with this responsibility of addressing the issue. And where do they get their mitigation from? And does it narrow that mitigation ability? And that's what the concern of the citizen was. So, I think it's worth asking. Thank you.
Commissioner Mejia, did you have anything? Are you?
No, my phone thought I had a question, but I don't.
Okay. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is review of a draft agenda for this afternoon's meeting. Meeting will be called to order at 2 p.m. Pledge of allegiance to be led by Vice Chair Fournier. We have approval of the agenda, presentations, proclamation for Women's History Month. That should be in our packets. It is.
And we have folks from the League of Women Voters will be here this afternoon for that.
Okay, any questions on the proclamation? Any last minute typos or changes?
Just on a style thing. I went to, I forget who's, Lacey's council meeting. And when they read a proclamation like this, they took turns reading the whereases.
We did that in the Board of Health at the Lacey council members' request. Would you?
I thought it was kind of cool. And it like gives everybody a chance to.
Yeah, I mean, it's working pretty good at the Board of Health. It's up to the board if you want to do it that way.
I would vote against it.
She says she votes against it.
What-
Fine, I'll do it.
I didn't hear what that was.
I thought she said she voted yes.
What did she say?
I said no.
Hey, sorry. Tried to help you there. Well, we can address that at for each point. Anything else on Women's History Month? No. Opportunity for public to address the board, county manager's update. Any updates planned? Okay. Our interim county manager is,
She's out sick today.
okay.
How
Hopefully
convenient.
we'll be back tomorrow.
Thinking she was back.
How convenient. Right on the tail end of vacation.
Well, it's unfortunate to get sick at the end of your vacation, but
Yeah, better than the whole vacation, I guess.
Okay, then consent items A through L. That's an L. All right, first up is auditor, U.S. Department of Justice Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant.
don't see anyone from the auditor's office this morning, but this is a Byrne grant specifically for
And
$25,609.
Mary is up there.
Auditor Hall, would you like to speak to this topic?
Sure. This is a grant from the Department of Justice, and the only way we were able to apply for and be awarded this grant is because we completed our EEOP. So again, a huge shout out to DV for getting that done really quickly. We really appreciate that. So this is going to add some additional security to our new voting center. We have a safe room, and it's going to allow us to put in a few ballistic proof doors in the facility. So at first we thought it was only going to be one, but Rick informed me last night that they were able to secure 2 with this funding. So, as soon as this gets signed off and we file the necessary paperwork with the appropriate organizations, it will go back to the feds and they will issue the award. So thank you very much. We're very grateful for this funding. Even though it's not a huge amount, every little bit helps. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions? I guess a reminder for the board, all of this agenda, or virtually all, would have been reviewed last week. This is our second review, so hopefully we can remember what we learned last week. Next up is 3B, Sheriff's Office, SWAT Memorandum of Understanding with the Lewis County Sheriff's Office. We have Under Sheriff and Chief Mencius.
Good morning. What this is just a interlocal cooperative agreement that allows our sheriff, Sanders, to enter into an agreement with the Lewis County Sheriff that we will provide our SWAT team as necessary. Their primary person or agency that they would call if they need SWAT is the State Patrol, but if the State Patrol is not available, then they would call us. And this is just an agreement in place that says that if any equipment or anything is damaged, that they will reimburse us for that, or any munitions, if we have to use gas or anything, that they'll reimburse us for those costs. And it indemnifies the people on the team. Our agency, SWAT team, has people from several agencies, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, Yelm. And then this is something that those agencies have wanted in place as well, to be able to go outside the county to make sure that their folks are covered.
Questions for the Under Sheriff?
Are there any other counties we have with those? I don't know, you guys went to Grace Harbor.
Yeah, we do go to other counties, and so that'll probably be something that'll be in the works. We'll do the exact
Work
same
on
thing
additional
for the
ones.
contingent counties that we go to. Just, this is the first one that came up, and I think that we'll be working on those too.
Sweet.
Okay, sounds like we're good. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Gentlemen. Next up is Treasurer, resolution adopting the credit debit card acceptance policy. Treasurer Gavin's with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. So this is an update. The original credit card acceptance policy was passed by the commissioners in 2006. It was last updated in 2016. So the changes I'm bringing before you are a result of just, it's 2024. It's time to look at this. Basically what it does is it emphasizes the language a little bit stronger, that any of the departments or offices that are bringing on a new payment vendor, they have to go through me first so that we can make sure that that payment vendor works with our financial systems and banking and all of that. The only other real big change, and it's not even a big one, so the current policy that's in place says that if somebody pays with a credit card, there's two changes. So the first one is that if somebody pays with a credit card, if they need a refund, that the refund is put back on that same card. I've added the words "when possible" because those refunds are only possible within 60 days of the transaction. And some things like the parks reservations, it might be 6 months before they have to issue a refund. So there's that. And then the other thing is, the current policy says service fees for the card, using the card, have to be passed on to the consumer. Added language in there that says that it must be clear what those fees are prior to the transaction being completed.
Questions for the Treasurer? Sounds like
All
we're
right.
good to go.
Thank you. I will not be here this afternoon.
Okay, very good. Consent item, so it should be not a problem. Item 3D is prosecuting attorney item, resolution amending the Public Records Act policy.
And Karen is online.
Karen Horowitz from Prosecuting Attorney's Office, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Commissioners. So similar kind of to the last item, this is just an update to our Public Records Act policy. It was last updated by the board in 2011. So the update does things like correcting incorrect statutory references, updates to reflect the fact that we have an online portal now for the public to submit requests, which we didn't have back in 2011. It's an update or a refresh rather than really a big substantive change for the public or for how the county does business. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Questions on the public records update? Nope, thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Next up is item E, Community Planning and Economic Development, Certified Local Government Historic Preservation Grant, Dana Bowers and Jeremy Davis.
Good morning,
Morning.
I'm Dana Bowers, Associate Planner. I'm here because this item is for requesting approval to receive a grant funding for updating the historic register. And it is to hire a consultant to help with the paperwork associated with the update. And that's pretty much it. It's $10,000, and the grant was from September last year to September next year, September 2024, excuse me, and should be complete here shortly.
They'll have time to get that done, guys.
Oh, yeah.
We will.
Questions on the register grant? This was pretty exciting for our committee, historic committee. All right, perfect. Thank you. Next up, item F, also CPED, is hearing examiner contract amendment.
Yeah, this is an amendment requested by the Thurston County Hearing Examiner to update the rates and charges in their current contract. It would result in a 10% increase approximately in the subcontractor rates and a 14% increase in the hearing examiner rates. Her hourly rate on this would be $200 an hour, which is still less than the competition in my opinion. We don't have any issues with her requested increases at all. The increases would be paid for by the applicants, of course. So.
That was my question, is like, how, and then what's the process for adjusting those fees?
For adjusting the fees?
The applicant fees?
I'll work with the fiscal manager to see if we need to do it. With the hearing examiner in particular, they put a deposit in, and the hearing examiner charges against the deposit until that deposit is exhausted. And then any amount over that is then billed to the applicants after the public hearing.
Okay, so it's not like a fee set by ordinance or, okay.
No, sir.
Thumbs up, sounds like good, thank you.
Right.
Next item is also CPED item, resolution reinstating the Fairgrounds and Event Center Manager classification and creating position 27RO1760.
Okay, Commissioners, we reviewed this last week. Again, this is adding the fair manager to county position control. The funding for this position was added to the 2024 budget with the budget amendments last December, the annual budget last December. So, sorry. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that. We are getting ready to go forward with that as soon as we can to bring someone on board.
Okay, looks like we're good to go on that one. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, thank you.
Next up is Superior Court, resolution setting terms of employment and compensation for official court reporters classification.
Commissioners, Kristen Jensen is joining us this morning, hopefully to be able to correct any of my misstatements last week when I was trying to anticipate what this document is. So,
Morning, Kristen. We sort of bumbled through figuring this out, and I think we got there, but if you could succinctly give us a summary, it would be helpful, I think.
Thank you, Commissioners. Excuse me. Yes, this was just to add to the court reporter compensation document that spells out their terms of conditions. You'll see it as attachment A. Specifically, the addition, let me get to the right page. The addition was to add the 5% increase to the lead court reporter. And that was silent previously in their terms and compensation package.
And that position was created fairly recently, if I remember right?
Yes, we requested the lead court reporter to do a number of duties that just to help to organize and add some structure to that team. We currently have 6 court reporters, and the lead court reporter performs a number of functions such as staffing, coordinating leave, coordinating their licenses with accounting, cart services, ADA real-time requests, things along those lines.
Questions for Kristen? Looks like we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Human Resources Resolution for appointments to the Washington County's Risk Pool.
Commissioners, doesn't look like Brian Bishop is with us this morning, but this is the process by which we designate the appointees to the Washington County's risk pool. That includes both commissioners as board members as well as other individuals as alternates. And it's one of those items that we really only need to, it's a housekeeping item that we do when there's a change in what our representation is.
Any questions? Nope. All right. Next up, auditor voucher list. We have 3 voucher lists for the weeks of February 12th, 19th, and 26th. There was a question out. Was there a question last week?
I think we had it answered.
We got that answered, yes. It was for a consultant through CPED for Oz, the Alliance for Health, South Sound.
Oh, that's for Healthy South Sound.
One thing of note, though, on item L, that it was a voucher packet that we just received the end of last week. In reviewing that item, there on page 2, there is a charge for approximately $730 for cubicle glass here in the atrium. So I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that, and if there's any interest in moving this item from a consent to a department item.
Hopefully, when we get our audit back, we're gonna be in good shape and won't have to address this, but I do wanna stay consistent. If I could, I would ask that that be removed and placed on the agenda.
Okay, item L will be removed from consent. I got Commissioner Mejia.
So with item L, first of all, the amount needs to be added into the item.
We do have an updated copy of the agenda. Apologies for that. It's $1,627,359.35. So the agenda has been updated since.
Okay. And then cubicle glass, and this was, when was this purchased?
I would have to pull up the warrant. It was basically within the last month or so. If you recall, we did some reconfiguration of cubicles within the Commissioner Aids area. And because of that reconfiguration, there was a portion that didn't have glass because it used to be flipped to be against the wall. So this was an extension of that so that there could be additional sound.
This is part of the 5-commissioner setup.
Correct.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Fournier.
It's been a lingering question.
Yeah.
So whenever this comes up, and there's always the statement, well, if there's any, none of these costs had anything to do with the atrium, what's the backstory to that part of the briefing? Is there some consideration that needs to be given to certain?
Opposes the move to the atrium and has.
So any
opposed-
costs,
Any
he
costs
wants those segregated and
It had
called
to do with
out?
tenant improvements versus just ongoing doing business.
Okay.
So if there's something that relates to the tenant improvements, Commissioner Edwards has consistently requested those be dependent.
Somewhere else to sit aside.
So he can vote no.
Okay. And
Just so
then,
I can remain consistent.
okay, and
And
then,
I think we're getting close to being done with that. I am,
but it has nothing to do with the audit.
well, it could have when we get done with the audit. It has to do with bids and such, so.
Right, and one could argue this was basically a cost of doing business and not necessarily tenant improvements, because it truly is in response to a configuration or reconfiguration.
It's a county asset. It's not a building fixture.
And it was done after the initial.
We would have
move-in.
spent, if we were still in the old building, Commissioner, and we brought the 5 in, we would have done we had to do a whole
I'm
bunch
sure
of
we
other
would.
expenses related to accommodating them. So to me, it's not really the same, but it's your call to have it removed.
I'm just trying to stay consistent with it and the bid process comes in. I'm aware of the piece of plastic and I'm appalled at the price, to be honest with you. And
expensive plastic.
I would sure like to know how that bid came about or how that assessment of value was determined. And that is part of the audit issue.
Probably just ordered straight off a Uline or some magazine, or there's no bid for
Well, I
this.
think,
Using the same vendor that we've used for these cubicles and the equipment.
I actually offered to bring a piece of plastic in and do it for free.
Yeah.
Well, they're actually glass and they're supposedly two-sided, so you can write on them like a whiteboard and it can be creative space.
It's
Nicole, did you have any-
probably government at its worst. I mean, government does some good things, but this isn't one of them.
If I may, I just wanted to add that the tenant improvements is a project, a capital project, and this expense would not be charged to that capital improvement project for the atrium, if that helps the distinction between the costs.
So this would come out of current expense.
Okay, well, if you want to leave it alone with that explanation, I'm fine.
Okay, let's just
Is
keep
that
it on
Keep it on
consent then, if
consent?
that's okay. Thank you. Thanks, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, let's go to item 4A, lodging tax awards.
And Jenica is here? for the site.
Hey, good morning, Jenica Machado, Economic Development Manager. This is the final action in the 2024 Lodging Tax Advisory Committee process. The LTAC committee met on January 22nd and 25th to review the lodging tax award applications. The 2024 award cycle has $150,000 available to distribute to qualifying applicants. LTAC received 24 applications within the application window. This totaled over $318,000 in requested funds. LTAC has recommended a breakdown in the attached exhibit to distribute $150,000 to 24 applicants. This afternoon, we're looking for a motion regarding the LTAC award recommendations. I'm happy to take questions.
Gone over this a few times.
I was gonna just look at our chair that's on that committee and see if he was given the thumbs up, I was gonna give.
Great job, Jenica. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jenica. Next up is 4B, option to lease agreement with EDF Renewables Distributed Solutions, Inc. Rebecca Harvey, Climate Mitigation Senior Program Manager, to remind us briefly.
Good morning, Commissioners. So I have the two items back to back here, and these are for two concurrent agreements with EDF Renewables, which together represent a key step forward in planning for a potential solar energy project on the Thurston County Waste and Recovery Center on the closed landfill. And so the agreements include first an option to lease agreement, which grants EDF Renewables the exclusive right and option to lease the area on the property for a 2-year period. And the second one is a right of entry and access agreement to go along with that. This one explicitly allows them to come on site to do all the diligence and investigations that they need to do to assess for sure if this is going to work and is going to be a feasible project. During the 2-year period term for both of the agreements, the county can then move forward with EDFR to explore a potential long-term lease agreement and work on negotiation of that. And the team is here with us if you have any questions. Thanks.
See any hands? I think we went, asked some questions last week and good to go.
All right, thank you.
And that's items B and C. Okay, let's move on to D then. Setting a public hearing for continuing a telecommunications franchise agreement with Michelle Telecom, Inc., doing business as Light Curve. Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. Somehow got stuck with this particular item.
Yes, because some of these lie in the commissioner's office, so.
Okay.
I can read my spiel here just to refresh your memory from last time. So Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. Michelle Telecom, as you mentioned, is doing business as Light Curve, is seeking to continue a non-exclusive franchise agreement to construct, operate, and maintain fiber optic telecommunication lines in the Thurston County right-of-ways for the purposes of providing telecommunication services. So this item is to set a public hearing for March 19th. Per RCW 3655-040, we must post notification of that public hearing in 3 different locations in the county seat. So that was done on March 4th at the courthouse, here at the atrium in front of the auditor's office, and also at the Timberland Library. And then also in the Olympian on March 11th, so next Monday, there will be a second posting in the Olympian. And the other thing I'd like to add is at the public hearing on March 19th, I'll be asking that the board accept the franchise application and also grant the franchise and enter into a resolution. And that draft is in your packet, and it'll also be in your packet for the March 19th public hearing if it's set. If you have any questions.
We're setting a public hearing for the 19th.
Yes.
All right, and that's enough time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is juvenile court probation and single source professional services contract with Heart Strides Therapeutic Horsemanship. And Ted Bryan is here from juvenile court. Morning, Ted.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Ted Bryan, Juvenile Court Administrator.
Can you just remind us this item, kind of why we're doing this single source contract?
Yeah, Heart Strides is funded through TST. We have a contract. They are a single source provider. We reviewed all other horsemanship programs in Thurston County and in our vicinity. Had Brandon Weber review that entire process, and he approved HeartStrides as a single source or sole source provider.
Questions? Commissioner Edwards?
Ted, this is a maximum amount, and oftentimes it does not get completely utilized, is that right?
Yes, that's a maximum amount.
And then the funds would revert back to the treatment sales tax?
Yes.
Any other questions for Ted?
Yeah, one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did we fix anything over there yet, Ted?
No, sir. Sorry to say no. Still going to be working with facilities on the detention controls and go from there. But we're still not operational.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Public Health and Social Services. 6A, contracts for program management and direct client services related to the LEAD program.
Which also is related to item 6B, and Katie is here this morning.
All right.
Thank you. Katie Strozik, Opioid Response Coordinator at Public Health. Both A and B are related to our Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, which is ran by Thurston Mason BHASO. It's a program providing intensive case management and increasing pre-arrest diversion for our community, especially targeting individuals with behavioral health issues or extreme and constant poverty. The first item is to move forward our 2 subcontracts with our BHASO and with Olympic Health and Recovery Services, which is the direct service arm of our ASO. It's to actually provide the program management and case management services. And then the second item is between the county and healthcare authority, and it's the contract for us to actually receive the funding that we subcontract out.
Questions for Katie? Commissioner Edwards?
So B is the money coming in and A is the money going out, is that it?
Correct.
And that's coming from the state?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katie. We'll move on to 6C, request for proposals for Offutt and Pattison Lake Management District's Integrated Aquatic Vegetation Management Plan, or IAVAMP, development. Stuart Whitford from PHSS.
Good morning, commissioners. So last week we presented this, and you guys had asked to get a little more background on what an integrated aquatic vegetation management plan is and what a cyanobacteria management plan is. And so I will do that in a second, but basically these are both RFPs that I've been working with the lake management districts on for quite some time, and this one is for Offutt and Pattison to develop basically an integrated aquatic vegetation management plan. The purpose of integrated plan is first of all, it's a very public process where the public will have input into the plan development, multiple opportunities for that. The LMDs are required to follow Open Public Meetings Act and Public Records Act, and so this is a very transparent process. Basically, aquatic plants are an important part of freshwater systems, and they provide a lot of beneficial, things. However, when problem plant populations limit use of a water body, the solution lies in careful management and finding a remedy to nuisance plants that is effective, ecologically sensitive, and economically feasible is the goal of an integrated aquatic plant management plan. And so that essentially is the purpose. In this case, both Pattison and Offutt received $30,000 grants from the Department of Ecology to do these plans. And they also will be matching that with Lake Management District fees to actually produce the plans over the next year. So that's the description of that. Do you guys have any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
No, I guess not. Maybe I ask Rob I think you and I discussed, is there going to be a briefing to the board at some point soon about the administration piece of our lake management programs?
Correct. on a concurrent path, we've been meeting with leadership from the LMD steering committees and developing what is our standard operating procedures, or the SOPs, which is a very robust document. If you recall, prior to Commissioner Fournier and Klaus coming on board, we had the administrative rules. This actually takes that and expands upon it to provide clarity around roles, but also it's kind of a how-to manual of best management practices and different tools that LMDs can avail themselves of to as they continue to manage their respective LMDs. So that the intent will be to come before the board, since we are at a good part of the path in drafting that, to come and provide the board with a deeper briefing on that prior to bringing forth an AIS for acceptance of that SOP as a sort of that governing document for the lake management districts in probably early April.
I have a question, but it's not for, I think it's more for Rob. This has been a nagging question. One of our citizens came in and there was some comment made about who owns the bottom of the lake. And so I'm really curious, like legally, where the county's jurisdiction begins, who actually owns under the lake? Is it divided like a pie? Is it like your property stops at the water's edge? Like, is there some type of definitive, like, legal guidance or opinion that you could find or somebody could let us all know about and we could all share that knowledge with each other?
It's a great question, one that I don't have a specific answer to.
I understand rivers, I mean, right, that's pretty clear.
Often within, it has to deal, the particular constituent has talked about a long time ago court case and a decision that was rendered that relative to the navigability of a waterway and how that relates to potentially the ownership and where it becomes waters of the state or the state.
Like that specific incident, I'm curious about, but I really want to know like the framework of like in general.
I got into this with Travis a few years ago when that same person brought this to my attention, and I can't explain it to you other than just to say that like the analysis hinges on the navigable versus non-navigable, and there's some old case law that kind of conflicts as to what there's a lack of clarity as to the definition of a navigable waterway.
So if
versus
it's like a
non-navigable.
marsh, it may be your property.
Yeah, versus if it's like something you can, paddle a boat through or whatever, then it becomes not treated that way. It's in a different legal scheme. But I think what got confusing is there's an old case that if you read it, it sounds like something like it's a broader, a more limited definition of navigability, and it would sound like something like Pattison Lake could be considered one way versus I think the way it currently is considered. But
do we have an opinion from our attorneys on that specific?
We never got
space?
there because, like, as I've said before, like the question before the board was about our ability to allow citizens to form a lake management district. Mm-hmm. And my takeaway from I got kind of lost in the legal intricacies but the higher level answer was it doesn't affect our ability to form a lake management district. So I kind of stopped I stopped my trajectory down the rabbit hole because it wasn't really pertinent to the board's decision at the point, but it was an interesting question. It was an interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah. Can we get an answer to that specific property? If that that would be something we would ask our attorneys, is that truly lake or is it? And then the other one, I just want to know in general, what are the guidelines?
Yeah, I could add just a little bit. I mean, in general, the state owns navigable waters, the bedlands, et cetera. But there are private tidelands on salt water, obviously. And yeah, you mentioned this court case. But what I wanted to say more importantly is that, the process we're going to have for the development of this plan will be public. I've met with this gentleman a number of times. I think he understands that we now have a full understanding of what his concerns are. And also we've talked to the, Pattison and Offutt LMDs. They want to be sensitive to individual property owners' needs, and requests in terms of, if decisions are made to apply certain herbicides and, creating conservation areas so that that person can be comfortable that there's nothing being applied in that particular situation. They're completely, open, and we're completely open to that. And so that's why we're doing this plan, to get everything vetted, get it out on the table, and develop a plan that's effective, environmentally sensitive, and also economically done, for the county. So.
I was gonna say that when I looked up this and I went through my own rabbit hole on it, I went to the state to see if there was any guidance, because it's technically, their lakes, right? And they own the water, is that the, and so even their guidance is kind of really gray. So there wasn't anything clear, concise that says really who owns the bottom of the lake, so.
It all depends. I've heard that.
That, but hey, that's if you ask them on the spot. Let's get a legal opinion. Let's put them to work. Mr. Thunheim, if you're watching.
I would like to have an answer, and even if that answer was, there's too many variations to give you a definite answer or something, because things like navigable depend on such small items as
Depends on the
shake
vessel.
boats.
Yeah.
Shake boats being floated down the river in 1900 became a big commercial activity. And so they threw that in on that. Boat wouldn't have been able to get through, but product was able to get through. So, boy, there's some complications that go with it.
So, I mean, this item is sort of that initial start. It's an RFP that combines both or two of the LMDs so that hopefully they can achieve an economy of scale in terms of the pricing of it, but definitely will create two specific plans that are transparent, open, and responsive to the residents of those respective lakes. So that is our goal.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to create work for the prosecutor's office, but Travis, Nick, you may want to ask Travis, because he went through this to some degree with me like 3 years ago, and he, he probably with probably minimal effort, he can remind himself
I
of.
want something in writing, some kind of legal opinion for all of us. though.
Yeah.
I don't want to just go down a rabbit hole with.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah.
Sometimes there's situations that they would just as soon stay away from because it opens up other potential issues.
Brings back around.
So, yeah, so this item is the IVAMS moving forward. And then the second item D specifically. Stuart?
So this is a separate RFP for Lake Florence, which has had historically significant problems with cyanobacteria in the lake water. Cyanobacteria are a naturally occurring organism. They've been around for billions of years, but when excess nutrients are available, their populations can grow out of control and outcompete other types of algae. And the big negative is that they can create toxins, they can reduce dissolved oxygen in the water, et cetera, et cetera. So Lake Lawrence has applied for a grant from Department of Ecology, received that grant for $50,000 to develop a plan to address the cyanobacteria in the lake. And then they're also going to apply in matching funds and additional funds, Lake Management District fees, to produce this plan. And again, that'll be another public process, to go through the development of that plan. And so we're requesting your guys' support of this RFP to go out in the next few days for that project. And like I said, it's a $50,000 grant from Ecology, and the total estimated cost is $107,000. And our goal is to complete that plan by December 31st, 2025.
This item talks about phosphorus, and you kept mentioning something bacteria. I didn't catch the first word. Cyno?
Yeah, CYN.
Cyano. Cyanobacteria. So they're kind of an ancient organism. They in lakes, especially our kind of lower Puget Sound lakes, when there's excess nutrients available, they can end up being the dominant species, and those species tend to produce toxins which can make animals sick, they can make people sick and cause all sorts of problems. There's also documentation and literature about some of those toxins being able to go airborne, and that if you're a long-time person living on a lake, that you can actually have airborne impacts from toxins in the air when the situation is really bad. So the idea here with Lake Lawrence is to get things more in balance, so that we don't have a worsening trend in those concentrations of cyanobacteria.
How does that relate to the phosphorus that's mentioned in the item?
Oh, phosphorus is the primary nutrient that is uptaked by these organisms. That's their primary food source. And so when it's overly available, they will take advantage of that and grow in numbers, and then they start outcompeting green algae and other things in the water that is not healthy.
Okay, so phosphorus falls within the umbrella of nutrients.
Exactly.
Managing it to a level that doesn't allow it to take hold.
Yep.
Or become the dominant.
Other questions for Stuart?
I guess just to add to that, I'd point out that Lawrence Lake and maybe some of these other lakes were also original sawmill ponds. And there was a lot of wood product shoved back out into the lakes that sank to the bottom. In Lawrence Lake, there's places where the muck and sawdust has not even deteriorated completely. And it's like 10 or 12 feet deep. And it's a problem. Created many years ago.
Is that what produces the phosphorus? Is like
It's
decaying
part of the
wood
nutrient
product?
problem.
It's part of it, and then every year you have growth, and then you have the die-up of aquatic weeds, and those go to the bottom, and those end up becoming phosphorus available, for the next growing season. So it can end up being a kind of a vicious cycle. But yeah, the commissioner is right. A lot of our lakes were used in this way. Black Lake the same way, Lake Lawrence the same way. That material is down there, and normally it shouldn't be there.
I was going to say.
And so it's caused the lake to probably progress faster towards eutrophication than it normally would have.
When we were considering Black Lake, they had a consultant study that showed that like 63% or something of the phosphorus in the lake was created by this.
Wow.
And so even if we cleaned, eradicated all development, every septic system, every bit of stormwater, every external source, almost two-thirds of that phosphorus and out problem would still be present.
Wow. And there's no way to clean out that stuff.
There,
And it takes
yes, there
hundreds
is
of
way.
years.
Dredging through suction dredging takes care of it.
Ah.
But it's a expensive process to do.
Disposal,
And natural decay of that stuff takes hundreds and hundreds of years.
especially when it's in water. Same with salt water and timber mills that were on salt water, same thing. There's just feet and feet of old
algae debris.
Yeah, so normally what happens is in these cases, because you can't really dredge, there are materials that can be added to the lake water that will basically settle down to the bottom and prevent the phosphorus from re-entering the lake water, essentially, to kind of seal it off. That has to be done on a regular basis, but it's basically phosphorus control. So it's Phoslock and those types of things that would most likely be promoted in this plan to address the phosphorus issue, which then, assuming that works, then the cyanobacteria should become more under control and more in balance with the other algae that are present.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Let's go to item E, agreement with Catholic Community Services. We're still under Public Health and Social Services, and Mark Moffitt is here, Community Program Manager, to go over this item with us.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Moffitt, Public Health and Social Services. I promise you no cyanobacteria, no phosphorus, only navigable waters right now. So each year we solicit proposals from the community to provide shelter beds for homeless vets. The only agency that responded this year was Catholic Community Services, and we have done business, or we have contracted with them for the past about 7 years or so to provide this service. The details of this contract have not changed in the past 3 or 4 years. We will pay Catholic Community Services $45 per bed, up to 3 beds each night. and this is a contract for reimbursement. So each quarter, Catholic Community Services submits documentation for each veteran that they served with their DD-214s, their discharge papers, to show that they do meet the requirements, RCW requirements as a veteran. And this is for a total of $49,275. And last year, I don't have the final numbers, but we did not use, I think, half of this amount. We didn't have enough veterans coming through Catholic Community Services, just to give you some perspective on it.
Questions for Mark?
Thank you, Mark. That was going to be my question. Do you think it's that maybe not enough veterans know about it, or are they going to other places? Like, the need is obviously still there, right? I'm just wondering.
That's correct. So prior to COVID in 2019, we served, I think, about 14 or 15 veterans. And through COVID up until now, it's only been about 4 a year total. So I don't know how COVID impacted that. Being a veteran, we don't look for a lot of services. And so I don't know if they're not coming in for that reason. There is a coordinated entry issue as well. So if a veteran comes to me, I can't just send them to Catholic Community Services to get a bed. They have to be on the list for coordinated entry. So I'm working, I spoke to, I can't remember her name, but I spoke to her about there's 3 or 4 lists. You probably know more about the list than I do. And that veteran list, we're trying to figure out how we can get those out to Catholic Community Services, whoever's on that. The other problem with that list is that they lose contact with people. So they may be the veteran might be 1, 2, or 3 on that list, but if they can't get in contact with them, they move on to a separate list. So the veteran doesn't actually get to be placed.
Thank you for that and for letting me know that that's a problem.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
You bet.
Next up is item 6F, setting a public hearing to consider an ordinance expanding the Veterans Advisory Board membership.
Yes, Commissioners, we want, so the Veterans Advisory Board, the current advisory board wants to set a public hearing to consider changing our current ordinance, expanding the Veterans Advisory Board from 9 to 15. They want to work on more or on multiple goals, and they think that using separate committees to facilitate that would help. Currently with the 9 advisory boards, that's not enough to work on multiple goals.
Questions on expansion of Veterans Advisory Board? All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Public Works, 7A, request for qualifications for on-call engineering and professional consulting services.
Don Ashton is here this morning to cover this item.
Perfect. Morning, Don.
Don?
Good morning. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Dawn Ashton, Public Works Procurement Specialist. Public Works is requesting authorization to issue a request for qualifications for on-call engineering and professional consulting services to establish individual contracts with consulting companies for engineering and professional consulting on an as-needed basis. And the budget is as needed or as it allows. Once the RFQ is issued and we receive responses, those responses will be evaluated and scored, and we will return to the board and ask for permission to award to the selected companies. The anticipated contracts are expected to be a maximum term of 5 years with an initial 2-year base and 3 one-year renewal options. These contracts are going to be for engineering and professional consulting, and they're going to support planning, designing, construction, and other activities related to public facilities. In the past, we've had these contracts in place. This set's going to replace those that are expiring in July. And the benefits have been that the department can efficiently issue task orders requiring skills and expertise that we don't have available in-house.
And it improves timeliness if there's emergencies or unexpected projects. And it advances work that if we couldn't do sooner, this allows us to do them in a more timely fashion, especially if we have limited resources. The funding is going to come from various sources. It could be a grant, county road fund, water and sewer, solid waste funds. And it won't be funded with any federal funds. Those will be purchased separately. And I'm available for any questions.
Questions for Dawn? Not seeing any. Looks like we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we'll hit standing items, and we will have a public hearing at 3:30 regarding Public Works application of PUD number 1 for non-exclusive franchise for a water system within Thurston County rights of way. Craig Sisson, Real Estate Services Manager. Remind us about this one, Craig.
Yes, this is for the Thurston PUD. It's a franchise for utilities within Thurston County rights of way, to include all county right of ways that are outside the incorporated areas, cities, and towns. This is a renewal of an existing franchise. It's a 10-year period. Their previous one has expired.
Questions for Craig? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take that up at 3:30, regardless of where we are on the board agenda, and then we'll resume the board agenda. And next up on this morning's agenda is proclamations and awards. We've seen Women's History Month. That's the only draft in the packet. I think that's our only proclamation for March. Looking at the first, anything to address today regarding these?
Representative from the League of Women Voters will be in attendance to accept the proclamation. They've asked for just a moment or two at the podium to thank the board and distribute buttons.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, good. Next up is advisory boards and commissions. We have a hefty packet here.
There is a hefty packet that printed single-sided instead of double-sided. Starting at the top, all three applications that the Agriculture Advisory Committee reviewed for the vacant farmer seats are included and were provided after agenda setting last week. The committee provided a recommendation for Donnie Wilcox to be appointed to the vacant farmer seat. Is there any discussion or direction before we look at the next?
All right, let's take up advisory committee. I know some commissioners wanted to have a little more time. I was one of them, and I think I've had sufficient time. Commissioner Klaus, I think, might have been one of the other ones, can't remember. But I guess, is there any discussion we want to have? Do we want to follow the recommendation of the Ag Committee for Mr. Wilcox?
I would like to follow the recommendation of the Ag Committee. Mr. Wilcox comes from a long-time ag family. He should be quite an asset to the Ag Committee.
I wanted to see the rest of the applications because we only had Mr. Wilcox application. We didn't have the rest, so I watched the Ag Advisory Committee meeting as well, and so.
His farm is in Pierce County, but I still think his expertise is probably on point, so.
I believe he lives in
Thurston.
Thurston.
Yeah.
So is there support from the board to advance Mr. Wilcox?
I'm good with it.
3, 4. Commissioner Klaus?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, then it sounds like we have consensus to move that forward.
Would you like that added to today's agenda under consent
Yeah.
or for?
Just do it, yeah. If we're good to go, we're good to go. Okay, next up then is Housing Authority. Go ahead.
The Housing Authority has provided two applicants for reappointment, Jay Goldstein and Jolene Lewis. Jay's recent term just expired last week, and Jolene's recent term expired in December. No other applications have been received, and Craig Chance, Executive Director of the Housing Authority, has provided additional context on each applicant, which is included in your packet.
Page 15, there's a lot of blank pages in here, but on page 15 is where I see the start of the Housing Authority. I know Mr. Goldstein, he's an attorney who has like property and real estate expertise, has been on there for quite some time. I don't know Ms. Giolis.
I know Mr. Cooper on there, he's probably recommended him.
Yeah, we've added, the other three are folks this board added. And I think we've reappointed Mr. Goldstein once, but,
I'm in favor of Jay Goldstein.
are these 5-year terms?
No, they are 4-year terms.
Did we change that? I'm trying to remember. There was a point, it says every 5 years at the bottom.
I'm okay with both of them, just comes up.
At the bottom of page 15, there's,
Correct. I'm sorry, after the next term expiration for a few of these positions, then they will be 5-year terms.
So for these reappointments, then they would be reappointed to a 5-year term.
Correct.
And then subsequently, anyone else who's reappointed would then change.
The rest will follow, yes.
I'm good with both of them.
okay, any concerns about advancing the 2 reappointments then? There's page 19 and 21 has a summary. Sorry, page 17 and 21 of the packets have summary of each of the candidates from, I think from the director.
Correct.
So I think I'm good. Does anyone need more time? These are brand new, but I know, in the past, we've had multiple applicants and we've, I've actually individually interviewed all the candidates and, but there's no other applicants at this juncture, so. I'm good. And their reappointments. Commissioner Klaus, any thoughts or concerns about appointment of these 2?
No, I don't have any concerns.
Okay, let's just put them on.
Thank you.
Want to remark that we should update the bottom of the application of the form because it's still got the previous clerk of the board's name and contact info.
Thank you.
Okay, good catch. Thank you. All right, PIO check-in.
Morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. I have updated the continuity of operations plan and crisis communications plan for the Commissioner's office. I'm going to finalize that once Mr. Hernandez starts April 1st because I need to include his information in there. And then I'll bring that forward so that the Commissioners have an opportunity to review and finalize that. And then also we have received a lot of interest in videos because we now have Devin. He completed his first video for the Switches On campaign for Rebecca Harvey and the climate program. And we will start sharing that on social media and in the Friday 5. We're also going to be meeting with the Sheriff's Office this week to discuss a recruitment video. So good hire. We're getting a lot of interest in doing some in-house videos. So it's going to be great for the county to have that asset.
I see, I skipped the Fair Board folks. Sorry.
That's okay. It's the same update from last week. The Fair Board will review those applications at their meeting tomorrow, and will provide their feedback next week.
Okay, nothing there. Okay, very good. Sorry. Megan, okay, anybody questions for Megan before we move on? Okay, Commissioner items. Commissioner Edwards.
We currently, on problem properties, and when I talk about problem properties, like at the intersection of Moon Road and Highway 12, that's been a problem property for years and years. down at the end of Moon Road, another problem property. And I think that both those properties are held by the Veterans Administration somehow or another. Another one over on Carpenter Road, same kind of a thing. Apparently they had something to do with the funding mechanism, and then somebody died and others were allowed permission to be on there by the person before they died, or at least that's the story our folks are getting. Anyway, there's numerous properties around the county that are an ongoing aggravation to the community. And one of the things that we do is we eventually take an action, and on the one down at Highway 12 and Moon Road is an example. And the action is taken for all kinds of different things. No septic, living vehicles on the property, junk vehicles, nuisance parking, all kinds of things. But when we take an action and send a notice out, it is only good for 30 days. And then it falls in the I don't care file. I don't know, because nothing seems to come from that after 30 days. And there is a penalty supposedly building up of $125 per day for that 30-day period. But then once the 30-day period is up, nothing's happening. And I think we need a change in our ordinance that allows continuing violations to be continually assessed against by the county, so that we can encourage someone, whether that's a bank, held by a bank, or maybe the Veterans Administration, maybe by an individual, to let's get this problem solved. We did 2 of those properties recently. One was up at Clearwood. One was over by the school. I think it was LP Brown, and the school ended up getting that property. But taking those things to fruition take forever. The property over on Kaiser Road, I don't have the name of the property owner right now, but that went on for 20 years before that one was solved, going through our kind of existing antiquated system. So if we're really gonna solve problems for the community, we need to update our ordinances that allow those actions to have some teeth. And so I'd like to have something done on this.
Wasn't it the code that in your early years as commissioner that you guys came up with this sort of different way of enforcing these issues?
We tried, but it isn't working. And why isn't it working? Is there some state law that says after 30 days, King's X, you don't get to go anymore? I don't know. I wish we had an attorney here, but maybe we'll have an attorney that will be reviewing this discussion. I don't understand why we can't do more for the community when that's who we're working for. We're not working for these individuals that are taking advantage of a system that doesn't work very well.
Yeah, one of the challenges, and I too have been involved with various properties that have been historic. And unfortunately with, private property rights and due process, it can take a while. The Highway 12 and Moon Road specifically, they have entered into a voluntary compliance for that one. So hopefully we will start to see some movement in that regard. There specifically, I'm not aware of the other one on Moon that might have the same.
Well, it's the one the tribe's been complaining about down at the end of the road on the river.
On 12 and.
Yeah, it's on Moon Road off of 12.
Right.
Commissioner's got some input.
I mean, Rob's right. There's no avoiding lengthy process.
No.
There's a lot of constitutional protections when it comes to private property rights, and so there's no getting away from that. But I too am very curious what our processes are for code enforcement, for like nuisance abatement, and I would, we've had very general presentations on county functions. I would love to get more into like some of the minutia maybe instead of having just a director talking about what goes on at CPED, we can dive a little deeper and get somebody that, you know, is in charge or a practitioner of code enforcement, and we could just kind of get into some like details. And usually a lot of it just comes into like how aggressively you want to pursue those things, and, you know, letting the rest of the organization know that it's continually important, kind of, you know, you spotlight things there.
And I just say that, I mean, I'm not against what you guys are saying, but it's easy to take aim at somebody that's a clear bad actor, but it's a continuum.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you start, if you have aggressive enforcement, you start to get cases that aren't quite so clear. And then you've got people freaking out on both sides of the equation, and it's not 100% clear who's the bad actor. I mean, you have neighbor against neighbor disputes. We've navigated ones where people were at war with each other, and it's like, you didn't even know who to enforce against. So I mean, it's one thing when somebody's just obviously like the extreme case of like, there's no justification for what they're doing. But the kind of softer approach to enforcement, which again, I think was a product of the board right before I got on the board, is really a reflection of the fact that you have a continuum of scenarios and you want to try to work with people instead of choosing sides and coming down hard with a heavy government hammer.
Yeah.
You're trying to sort of giving people an opportunity to show that they'll work with us.
But there's like different ways to go about code enforcement. And there, you know, there's the reactive model where you're going out, you're waiting for neighbors to complain on neighbors or people to report other people on these egregious situations. And those are complicated and those need to be addressed. But then there's other approaches where you can take like a general problem of, you know, junk cars in the front yard, and then you can put out like a more massive public effort to say, hey, in 2025, the county wants to clean up inoperable cars in front yards across the county, and you educate the public on, you know, what that means, why we have the jurisdiction over that, what the consequences are. We want voluntary enforcement. And we're gonna go out and we're gonna look for all these scenarios in that one type of situation. And then you get really good at cleaning up that type of thing throughout the county. And you make a dent, and then you move on to something else like garbage in the front yard. And then you take that in 2026. And over time, you build like institutional knowledge about how to, you know, take care of these specific problems, and you move the needle. So like there's that approach to code enforcement that I see, and then there's also the reactive, like, you know, situation like Moon Road. And so like, what are we doing? Is that
Pretty reactive, but you know, but I see what you're saying. I mean, that's a good approach.
I think we can prioritize a lot of these things, and I think when raw sewage is being dumped out of these RVs and there's no septic system, how can we look the other way? I do not understand that, how we can claim we're concerned about the environment, but yet we don't emphasize that type of activity or chemical dumping at those type of locations because they got meth production going on or whatever it is. I mean, it just seems like we always seem to go after the good citizen that is more than likely to follow the rules. And we don't seem to put enough effort into the problem people that are really damaging the environment. I don't know of any good citizens that are dumping raw sewage and don't have a septic system or something like that. I mean, and how come we can't differentiate between the good willing or maybe the good intentions that maybe aren't going quite right, and the septic system needs another leg on its drain field or something is going wrong, versus raw sewage onto the ground, especially in areas where there's running water. And I've been faced with that with the Deschutes River several different times. Seems like we can never get adequate enforcement on those situations that are really bad. They go back to, oh, well, dilution is the solution, it sounds like, on that one. And I don't think that's ever acceptable. So I think we need to look and maybe talk to our code enforcement people. What can we do to help you help us solve a problem for the community. I just think that it's very important. And it just so happens, look, we've got the CPED director coming in.
Well, I think we're burning too. Well, as with all of your staff, they are generally streaming this and watching the conversations that are unfolding. I think it's worthwhile to try to schedule a deeper dive or a briefing specifically, but yes, there have been choices, decisions made in the past about sort of the compliance program. It is reactive, it is focused on a voluntary compliance, and there is, with limited resources, whether it's environmental health or CPED, a process of prioritizing those life safety issues, environmental impacts. Is it perfect? No, there's probably no program that's perfect, but I think we can definitely schedule something.
I mean, so I'll say two things. One is, it's just kind of like, it's got to be like part of the training, because when you're a new commissioner, like half the calls you get are about things like this, and you don't know what you can do or what the county does. So I mean, it's good just training, and it's a good refresher for us, you know. But, you know, I will take issue. I mean, we've heard issues about from staff about, oh, that's a place where people dump stuff, you know. So I mean, this whole dichotomy between good law-abiding citizens and the people that are maybe in hard times and living in an RV, I kind of take issue with that, because there's plenty of good citizens that don't feel like paying $18 at the work or driving something and are just dumping stuff. We get reports on that all the time. Or, you know, if you have a car sitting in your, you know, that's not, it may not be as directly environmentally damaging because of the, you know, the water quality issue, but those are choices that people make to not follow the laws and the rules. And you will get, if you start a more robust compliance plan, that's what I'm talking about, the continuum, you're gonna get people, you're not just picking on the vulnerable who can't fight back. You're gonna end up with people that are property owners that don't wanna hear about government telling them they can't have a rusty car in their front yard. And you're gonna get significant pushback. And it's not as simple, in my opinion, as you're making it. A reflection of the fact, I think that's why your board in 2016 or 2017 made that change, because there was a perception or a feeling that the county was too heavy-handed in some of its penalties, and the whole scheme was redone, Title 26. Josh knows the history of it better than I do, but I was educated on that when I got to the board. In fact, I think I had to vote on, it was like, it had been a docket, you guys had docketed it, and I think it finally came to like something that we voted on and passed in my first year on the board. Changing, having this graduated scheme where it's very soft-handed, and because it's a recognition of the fact that it's all kinds of people, for whatever reason, don't always follow the rules.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I think in theory, it's all great. But I mean, for what perspective I'm looking at it from is the funding mechanism of it. The reason that we are so reactive to everything, it's not just because of Title 26, but it's also because of the funding mechanism that really goes into how much are we really putting into code enforcement? And the reality of it is not much. And so I think it's also coming down to a budgetary question of like, how much are we going to really invest into this?
It's all general fund, right?
Right? It's all general fund. It's all, and if we're going to, whatever aspect of it this we're going to be doing, it's going to come down to how much are we willing to invest into this, and what funding are we going to put into it, knowing that it is coming from the general fund and it's going to affect us in that way.
Let me follow up on that. I really do think, though, we're allowed to recover expenses when we're taking action, and especially where we put something up for sale. And I think that recovery can be part of the funding mechanism.
It just all takes a very long time. That's the hard part when you get into that, is because, yeah, if you're gonna repo a house or something like that, that could be like a 10, 12-year process. And so you're, you know, yes, but it's hard to count on, it's hard to bank on, and it takes a super long time.
But I don't think we should ever quit because of the system. I think we're obligated to help citizens that are living in either next to or the proximity of some of these atrocious situations. And I got, one of the calls I got recently was from a grandmother, and she had to go get her 6-year-old first grader from school, a little girl, who had taken some kitchen knives to school with her. And when the counselor said, well, why are you doing that? Well, because I'm afraid to walk past this, and it's one of the derelict places that the sheriff's office has been working on for years. There's little kids running around in there, septic on the ground. It's over on 148th if you want to drive by and look at a real bum situation. And here, there's a little kid that's so scared that on their own, they load up their backpack and they're gonna have several knives they're taking with them. Now, what, pretty soon they find a gun or something? I mean, I don't want these situations to get out of hand. And I think we're obligated to do as much as we possibly can do within the law. And I'm not interested in somebody their cars broke down out front. That's not even close to what I'm talking about. Most of these places, raw sewage could be the main push for the health department to take some action.
I would love to have a discussion like mentioned. I think that's a great place to start. And I think that the board here we're the ones that set the community standards. And, I think that's how we do that, is through a discussion like that. And then we learn more about what resources we've allocated to those types of problems. And then we get to make decisions whether we want to make more investments or take different strategies. But, I also understand that, people that live throughout Thurston County don't necessarily all want to feel like they're in some type of HOA where their lawn height is regulated. But there's issues much more egregious than things like that we can address through setting standards like you're talking about.
So we'll find a time, come back, and.
We have time. 27th.
We already have a time, March 27th at 11 a.m.
Man.
So, there you go.
Okay?
Ask and
Any
you
other-
shall receive.
And will we have legal there? So we can ask legal. Is there some requirement that it's 30 days? What action can we take? All that kind of stuff. I think there are too many times that we have these meetings for discussions on issues and we walk away from them without real answers.
So it gets back to the conversation yesterday with Prosecutor Thunheim, right? To identify those kind of standing meetings, agenda setting, right? But also what are those, as we anticipate what briefings are coming up that might really be those topics that we need that additional support for, and then working with he and his staff specifically around those. So that's a great point.
So here's one for that cut bucket, sounds like. Josh?
So Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. I know you don't always just want to hear from the director. Sometimes you want to hear from the practitioners. I get that. And not to be reactive to this conversation, but I think that there's a couple of things to clear up. First off, this conversation has been had previous by the Board of County Commissioners. We heard that request. We have scheduled with the Board of County Commissioners and looking at the clerk, March 27th at 11 a.m. Is that correct? For an hour or half an hour? So 1 hour to begin this conversation. I think it's important to recognize, going back to a statement from Commissioner Edwards, there is no don't care file in compliance. All of the cases that we receive, we work to engage in an appropriate way under Title 26. Commissioner Mincer is correct. Title 26 was the compliance code that Commissioner Edwards was on the board of, that found that balance, looked to find that balance between being reactive and proactive, between a problem property, as Commissioner Edwards states it, and private property rights. And that's what Title 26 follows. I would say that the cases that come to the Board of County Commissioners are difficult. The ones that you hear about where little girls have to take knives to school, that's a difficult case. And that's also a case that we partner with the Sheriff's Office on, because that's a safety issue. But I would also say, in 2023, there were 252 code compliance cases that CPED received. And we have been proactive. We are not just reactive. We have programs for junk vehicles, which the owners usually call collector vehicles, which is a problem because there's a state law that requires different nuances with that. We have partnerships with public health and social services when it comes to the sewage issue that Commissioner Edwards continues to talk about. It's not a CPED issue, but we do work directly with EH to address those issues. And we have a monthly meeting called the Citizens Response Group with each one of your aides. And so we go through these difficult compliance cases. I want to make sure that it's clear that CPED, public health, your county staff are working for you, and that we have been proactive, and that we do care. And so when it comes to a conversation that I think is important to have by the Board of County Commissioners, recognize that we are working for you and for the community of Thurston County. We'll have data and background, like Commissioner Fournier asked, but setting the space to recognize that when an issue comes to you as commissioners, it's usually pretty difficult. And I think that Commissioner Mincer put it right on, that we can sometimes be used as a tool when neighbors are pitting themselves against each other. And we need to make sure that we're following our code and ordinances as approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So having a more full conversation, I think, is important, but I wanted to put that marker down as all of this is happening and is being live streamed, that your staff is working very hard for you. And we have 3 compliance staff in CPED for 250 cases a year for the entire county. So when it comes to the conversation of resources and general fund, that is a conversation that should be had. But I want to make sure that it's clear right here and right now that we do care and we are working for the community.
I just don't think you've ever had resources really to do the job appropriately.
And that's a board decision.
Sure.
And that issue at the front end of this whole thing about the 30-day notice and then because I was looking at that, I think it was Moon Road, or I was actually reading that same notice for the first time, like what does it say and how's it structured? And it talks about you can get penalized for up to 30 days. And is that just?
That'll be a good conversation to have with Sandy Norton, our compliance supervisor. That notice of violation, when we receive a complaint, we send out an NOV, a notice of violation, and we request that they respond within 30 days. That is essentially the opening of the case, so that we don't just go in guns blazing without understanding what's happening on the property. And then the penalties will incur thereafter if we don't hear back from them. So I think, again, a more detailed conversation, an hour isn't going to be enough, but hopefully it'll be enough of just not the director talking and the actual subject matter experts engaged.
Sounds good, thanks. Okay.
And one of the issues from a legal perspective, I know that some of our staff once in a while will say, well, we can't use a drone or something like that to take pictures or something in that regard. I would like to have legal tell us what is legal. Is the fact that you're using a selfie stick that's, 10 feet high and you hold it up and you can shoot across the fence to show that sewage is running down on the ground. What are our limitations that we can have people do? The county owns a couple of really good drones. I hate to see what the county would pay for something. I know Costco sells very good ones that are very capable for $500, and you can take the best pictures you ever saw. So why can't we use tools more efficiently instead of just saying, well, there was a court case that said you can't do this? What court case? I want to know more about the legalities of what we can and cannot do, so we're not asking our folks to do something maybe they shouldn't do. But on the other hand, maybe we can tell a citizen, well, if we had some photographs that came in here that showed that, maybe we could use those. But then are we asking them to be our agent? And then consequently, does that become some kind of a violation? So we want to look at all those things and get those kind of answers and get our staff on board, if you will, on what tools are available to them.
So I want to be prepared for the March 27th conversation. Commissioner, are you asking us to ask legal if it's legal to fly a drone over private property?
Well, that would be a question, but if it's not legal, what about on the edge of the property and you're not violating any airspace, you're on a public area here and you just lift up here 50 feet right above this public road and take a shot around, see what's going on. Those kind of questions.
Preview for legal counsel.
So,
Yeah, those are legal questions. And then what can we present in court? I know law enforcement is oftentimes restricted on what they can or can't do. And maybe that type of restriction impedes our enforcement people too. So I just want them to focus on the bad situations. I don't want to go after Commissioner Mentzer's people that are on hard times. I really don't. I want to get those that are openly violating the law. I use the environment because everybody is willing to do something for the environment. We all want to do a clean environment.
I just want to make sure I want to make sure that whatever set of rules that we come up with are applied to everyone and not selectively enforced against people that are perceived to be a problem in a way that other people who are equally violative of the rules are not perceived.
Well, when that little girl has to take knives to school, and the sheriff's office has been out there 24 times, made numerous arrests, there's little kids running around out there and barefoot, and DSHS doesn't seem to give a damn. So, anyway, I mean, there's things that we can go the extra mile to help our communities out.
Chair, dismissed?
Yeah, thank you.
Don't go too far.
Thanks, Josh.
All right.
If we're all close to being done, we can we can plow through.
I have an
Otherwise,
item
we'll
and I did want you to not go too far before I said it.
Let's take a break then. Sounds like we have several more commissioner items. So let's reconvene in about.
Never mind, Josh.
10:55. Welcome back. It's 10:56 a.m. We're picking back up with our agenda setting session for Tuesday, March 5th. We're on the final item 7, commissioner items. There were several, I think, hands I saw raised. I think Commissioner Mejia, I saw your hand next. We'll start with the first one and see how.
Okay, I just received some feedback on, and I completely just blanked on it, the advisory boards and commissions, especially the HAT committee is a committee where there's a lot of interest on it. And the fact is that we didn't publicize that there were openings on it. So I think, I don't know if there's a way, and again, this just goes back, right, you know, with all of our advisory boards and commissions and just, but whenever there are openings, just letting the public know, not sure if we can lay that out in process or if it's a news release or whatever it is. But I know that committee was one of the committees that we did receive quite a bit of applications last time it opened up. And not to say, you know, but I think just moving forward, something that we should have in mind on making sure that there's.
In the future, or?
Yeah,
removing
in
those
the
items from-
future, you know, I seeing the 2 applications right now, I mean, I think the board's in agreement to move those 2 applications forward, but in the future, I think it is a worthwhile to at least have, like, there are openings to make sure that they're getting out to the public. I know this one is one of the ones that does get some public interest, so.
I think we often tend to focus on vacancies on boards and commissions as opposed to reappointments. And so it's, yeah, I think it's one of those things that the board can look at is like, okay, if there's a reappointment coming up or we know one's coming, is that an opportunity to open it more broadly as opposed to just go towards reappointment? Do we actually publicize that as a potential opening?
I've brought this up a couple times, and yeah, I also don't really like what we do or don't do. So perhaps we could just review what our process is for board vacancies if we have one, and if we don't have one, let's talk about creating one.
I'm happy to sit down with Amy and we can kind of maybe map that out, some type of a flow chart of sort of what a process could look like.
Yeah, because I think it would be another level of effort, not to say it's not justified, but to be basically predicting the upcoming expiration of appointments where you expect the person's going to want to be reappointed.
I think that's why we lay it on the actual advisory board and the staff person, right? Like for this one, it's gonna take a month for you to be reappointed because it's going to have to be announced, for example, right? So, Mr. Goldstein, if you're interested in reappointing, like just a heads up that once the board knows that there is, you know, an opening, there's gonna be like a month because it's gonna be open for everyone. And so putting that responsibility back kind of on the advisory boards and making sure that they are reapplying on time, right? Not a day or a month or like just with enough time for us to receive.
Yeah, I think it gets also back to Commissioner Edwards' comment about sort of relying on the staff of those various boards and commissions to, I think we just sit down and, so here's a process, right? We know someone's term is coming up in 3-4 months, so there's a check-in with that individual. Are they interested in reappointment? If they're not, then it's a vacancy and you try to proactively recruit. If they are interested in it, just letting them know, you know, no offense, no harm, no foul, but it's our hope to also, you know, make that a possible appointment open to others as well. And so we just partner with each one of those staffers to stay on top of it. It's doable.
The next one or
Yeah,
pass it around?
let's go around because I think there's ones around the table. Go ahead.
I just wanted, this is a subject that came up several weeks ago when we were doing some of our briefings. And I believe as Commissioner Edwards brought up, discussing having the opportunity for hiring outside planning or for customers to be able to hire outside planning services for docket items and land use items. So, because, you know, we've been told that one of the choke points for getting docket items, you know, processed through is staff time. And some other communities have the option of, you know, hiring that out if you're willing to go and pay for a private consultant. And I wanted to see if that is something that we're still talking about, or if that's something that we can expect more information on. And I think Josh is ready to comment on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Joshua Cummings, Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. Yes, we have had a conversation on hiring outside consultants for work of items on the docket. The question that I've posed back to the board regularly is it a policy consultant or a process consultant that we're thinking about hiring? The policy consultant we have done in the past, we will do. The process is a little more complicated because the process requires public noticing, requires review of the Planning Commission, not just staff time. So staff time is one piece, but I would also say that there's only so many numbers of hours in a day that your volunteer Planning Commission can meet and research topics. So when you're considering the docket items, that is really the limiting factor, is how much time exists to review how many items. So even if you hire an outside consultant for process to move something through the process, it still needs to go through the noticing. It still needs to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. But I would say this is a good conversation to have. We have a meeting scheduled for March 27th from 10 to 11 a.m. on the next steps of your docketing process. And we're open to receive. If there's creative ways that we can think about moving forward, that's great. But I would caution to not think about how we're going to do something until the board has decided what we're going to do. And that's the next step in the process, is docketing. So once we figure out what the board would like to actually have us work on, then we can figure out how we're going to work on it. So I think it's a good conversation to keep having, but I don't want to get to the how until we've decided on the what. The what items you want to talk about, and then we can talk about how we're going to accomplish that in a timely manner, and breaking it into policy and process.
Thank you.
Maybe a follow-up on, actually an earlier statement is, you know, I don't think it's near as much an issue with whatever we're doing as, you know, there's no such thing as a I don't care file. I think the file that I'm really referring to is we haven't put enough resources in place to deal with the overload. And I think that applies, you know, towards planning as well, you know, so
Acknowledged.
It's frustrating.
And I will say, thank you for that acknowledgement, Commissioner. I will say that there's also process improvements in place. So we're definitely better than we were when we had a backlog of 46 or so items on the long-range planning docket. But we're not as good as we're going to be, and we're learning. And so we're learning from other jurisdictions, and we'll bring those opportunities for efficiency going forward. So better than we were, but not as good as we're going to be, and look forward to ongoing conversations.
Awesome.
Okay?
Okay, thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. I was hoping Robin would be here for this particular topic, but I'll just throw it out there, and maybe it needs to be deferred to another time. But this is about reclassification policy and our policy related to that. And the reason this has come up is that at the end of the budget process, you know, if the board remembers, we had a bunch of reclass requests. We really couldn't afford to do any of them. So we came up with, well, we'll try to do the ones that were like less than 10,000 or less than 15,000 or whatever. And then other folks were like, well, how come ours aren't being done? And we got more requests. It just kind of got all disjointed to where we basically said, okay, we're not doing them, but at the first of the year, we'll come up with kind of a way of handling them, you know, in 2024. So 2024 has rolled through, and we've had a few different reclasses come up on the board's agenda, just like they always kind of do. We haven't had that broad discussion about how to handle them systematically. And then when I met with the Public Works Director, she said that HR had told her that her reclass requests were, you know, the board had frozen those and we're not doing them until there's some future discussion, which kind of confused me because, and she was like, that's what the board directed. And she asked me, is that what the board directed? And I said, well, yeah, we kind of did direct that at the end of 2023, but in the meantime, several reclasses have gotten on and approved. So I don't know that that's what we've directed at this juncture, but I don't want Public Works or any other department being told inconsistent with, so I guess I'm trying to figure out where are we on handling reclasses, and are we freezing some of them or we're not freezing other ones? I'm looking to you, Rob, because you're the only one sitting here. It would be Rob and I'd be looking at if she were here, because I know she was really guiding us through that at the tail end of the budget process, how to handle all those, and I felt like she had a seed in her mind of how we might go about dealing with them this year, but we haven't had that discussion, and meanwhile, department directors are being told different things, it sounds like.
I don't know, but definitely we'll ping both Robin and Maria.
Okay.
For coming back to the board with sort of how are we handling.
Yeah,
this.
because I want to at least be able to tell, if there's board direction, it needs to be clear, and if we've got something we're working on, then we need to be able to tell consistently to our directors what that timeline looks like and what's happening. Meanwhile, people shouldn't be and I don't know if this has happened, but, because some of them related to budget decisions we made, but if folks are sneaking through, you know, ones and the other people are being told they can't submit them, that's not right either, so. Okay, so more to come on that. Commissioner Klaus, I guess you're up if you have a commissioner item.
Actually, I should have asked this when Josh was here, but as far as like the docket items, the 20-day comment period, I was just wondering, like, how are we putting it out there that the period is open? I've had a handful of people actually come to me with concerns that didn't even know that there was a comment period open. So I was just wondering, like, how effective are we being at advertising that so that people are aware?
So we can definitely get a follow-up for you. I know that we were pushing some out through our traditional, through, you know, PIOs, public information, so using our various platforms. I think we did a news press release as well.
Yeah, a news release went out February 23rd. We're doing multiple social media posts. A couple of news outlets picked it up. We're continuing to post about it, so, oh, here's Josh.
Josh and Ashley.
Oh, and there you go. Gotta love live streaming.
Yes, you heard the question? About how are folks being told about the docket comment period?
So CPED appreciates the opportunity to be ongoing responsive to Board of County Commissioners' inquiries. We had a briefing on this item a while back. We will have another briefing on this coming up March 27th. But I wanted to bring in Ashley Arai from Community Planning to discuss again the outreach efforts that we've been engaged in.
Yes, over the docket comment period, we are sending out emails to our listservs, our various ones. We sent out notices to the properties involved in the UGA swap per the board's direction. We are even trialing a lot of new outreach methods with Megan. Thank you for Megan's support. Here with notices even in the atrium, we have little things on the tables. We sent it out in the Friday 5. We've shared it with a lot of our stakeholder groups. And if there's any other channels that you think that we should take advantage of.
We also have had on-the-ground outreach to the underserved populations. Miriam Vellacion in our outreach program has been into the communities, the Tandas, the Mercados, the different places.
Not for the docket.
And we have a Thurston2045.org. So the word has been out there. The last piece of the puzzle, though, is you. We need you getting the word out to your constituents that provides them the opportunity to provide the comment. So again, the website is?
Thurston2045.org. So that's the comp plan update, and then there's the docket comment period. So we're doing outreach for both at the same time.
So if someone is not on our listserv, or how do they opt in so that we can get that additional information?
And that's why I mentioned the website, the Thurston2045.org. There's a link to joining all of the listserv items, and we can ensure that they get information from items that we've got. Commissioner Fournier?
I would use any constituents that contact you that say they're not, or they weren't, I would say recommend that they sign up for that Friday 5 email, and then they won't miss anything ever again. And whoever does that, it's a great resource that I would recommend sharing with folks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
But we're open to do more, like Ashley said. If there's a place in the community that we need to put more outreach into, Commissioner Klaus, we're open to receive that. So let us know where we might be missing on the docket or the comprehensive plan. Any of those items, we want to make sure that the net is cast as wide as possible.
Okay.
Is there somewhere that we should be thinking about?
Not off the top of my head. I would have to go back and look at my notes. But I remember I've had a couple meetings over the last week or two, talking to people who are really concerned, and we're actually in the middle of talking about a docket item, and I'm like, did you know that there's a 20-day comment period? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem if
I would say that's always going to happen.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, just like that Lacey police thing. They were working on that for like 6 years, and I'd read probably 50 articles about it. But then there's a whole bunch of people that day that say, we never heard a thing. It's always going to happen in this industry.
Do we have a better way to get onto the listserv? What's the best?
So for the docket comment period,
Yeah.
we basically, with something like that, that's really big, we'll send it out to all of the lists. So even if someone just signed up for to hear updates around agricultural items, something like docket, which might have a piece that, connects with agricultural, we'll make sure we send it out broad. So really, if they sign up for any of the planning lists, you'll end up getting emails related to things like docket comment periods or big pushes for the comprehensive plan update.
Also, feel free to use your planning commissioners to try to get the word out as well. And their connections. I know that I've contacted my planning commissioners and let them know that the docket, items are, they're very aware of it, but they also help get the word out. I've seen multiple emails from the Ottoman Society, for example. They sent out an email blast to their listserv about this, and I've seen other groups send out a listserv about the comment period. So for those people who don't know, just let them know and give them the information right there as you're meeting with them, because there's always going to be people who are like, I've never heard of this, so.
Okay, thank you.
There's also an element of personal responsibility, that each constituent has, to take upon themselves to find things out, because, they've given us 12 different ways that they've done outreach, and I think, everybody does a valiant effort to try to do outreach, but, there's constituents, maybe they're just coming into the system and learning about things, and it's our job to kind of educate them and guide them, and I think also make sure that they do understand that the county does a significant effort to try and put information out there.
Thank you.
I'll never forget the courthouse effort where there was 16 open houses, and I was still getting, at the end, people were like, what? I never heard about this. It's like, what more could possibly have been done? Okay, back to Commissioner Edwards.
I'm good.
Good, Commissioner Mejia.
Okay, you took my second one, but I'm gonna pivot to your aide and Thomasina. Yes. Yeah, sure.
Uh-oh.
She got the WASAC Board of Directors email, so I'm gonna pivot to her to explain the request because I didn't have a chance to thoroughly read it, but.
Sure. And I just read it as you were speaking. Thomas, for the record, Thomasina Cooper, Assistant to Commissioner Menser. Commissioner Menser did receive an email yesterday from WASAC, the Washington State Association of Counties, letting the WASAC members know that the Council on Public Defense has submitted their proposed caseload standards to the Washington State Bar Association Board of Governors. And this is a change to the caseload standards, a pretty significant change that I believe Public Defense Director O'Connor spoke about a few weeks ago. And these proposed standards would significantly impact the caseload. However, there's no funding attached to that. And so WASAC is putting out a request that counties write letters saying, we support this concept, but we cannot do it without additional funding. And they've given us an outline of some different component statistics that we could include in that letter. There is a time issue in that they are looking to take action on these recommended standards at their meeting on March 8th. Today is the 5th, so this is a very quick turnaround if the board is interested in writing this correspondence.
To the Board of Governor of Food? Who is this
The
that got?
Washington State
State Bar
Association
Association.
Board of Governors.
And I think the request is by tomorrow to develop a letter.
And the
It just
group-
came in
the group-
yesterday.
What again? Explain that.
It is, so the Council on Public Defense has submitted their proposed caseload standards to the Washington State Bar Association. So the request is to create a letter with our concerns, potentially, specifically around funding, I would imagine, not so much the standards themselves, but that funding piece and getting it to them by tomorrow.
And
So
getting it to who again?
to the Washington State Bar Association Board of Governors.
And why wouldn't we want that to go to our legislators? If they're gonna come up with something that they're gonna endorse, I mean, they're the ones where the money's gonna come from.
So my understanding that the legislature isn't part of the conversation currently around caseload standards.
Well, who is going to give that directive that here's the new rule you gotta follow?
That'll be coming from the Supreme Court.
So probably they have groups that are gonna be providing recommendations to the Supreme Court. And I guess WASAC's just trying to be proactive and get a letter out to this specific group and let them know that, you know, while we are supportive of the standards, we just cannot do it without
Are we supportive of the
additional-
standards?
I'm supportive of the standards.
I'm supportive of the standards, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's gonna be a huge cost issue.
But we don't have any resources to deal with.
Yeah.
We have a lawsuit pending on the current, like,
Yeah.
we're suing them based on underfunding of the current caseload standards. So it kind of, to me, it's implied that, you know, the letter could be nothing but see the attached lawsuit times, you know, and, you know, but I mean, it's pretty obvious where WASAC stands since we're in litigation over this particular issue. But if we're trying to influence the Washington SBA, I don't know this whole process. I don't know if the WSBA carries some weight with the Supreme Court. Apparently, that's probably they do, which is why we're trying to cool their jets and make them understand the
But
funding
if they're doing the right
realities.
thing, why should we even be trying to cool their jets? We should be advising our legislative body that
Find
here,
this.
here's the need, but
Yeah.
we're never gonna be able to implement this if we don't get adequate funding.
Yeah, I guess, and Commissioner Edwards, I kind of understand your question. It's like, what, if I'm sitting on the Washington WSBA Board of Governors, why do I care about the funding issue per se? That's not outside my purview. That's,
I think it's
I mean,
for
Education.
education, yeah, because they
But
don't
we
know.
But we should send a copy of that letter to all affected parties, I guess. It's, you know, so the county, the Association of County knows that we're doing this, so they can add to their, I mean, like you say, there's already litigation going on and maybe refer to that. But I don't think the bar's gonna care. They're gonna wanna do the right thing.
So would it, since Thomasina's at the table, would it be all right if I worked with Thomasina to sort of craft a letter or letter in response? And then I think
Get
CC.
Patrick involved in it probably too, I mean.
Mhm.
Patrick O'Connor.
So I've reached out to Patrick already. Don't want to, I mean, he's very involved in this whole process, so you don't want to, he's probably conflicted out on some level. But it definitely is from a board's perspective, it's how our ability to fund it. And making that case really pointedly. So I'm happy to partner.
And most of those cases are state-generated cases, really.
Oh, I think it's across the board.
Okay, well, that doesn't sound controversial, I guess.
Thank you, Thomasina. Sorry I put you on the spot, but it popped up for me and I was,
Commissioner Fournier, did you have anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Mejia? Or
Oh.
Commissioner Klaus?
No.
I don't have any either, so I'm just going around the circle.
I don't have anything else other than just my updates on
Nope,
what I did
I'm
last
good.
week, which is not anything.
I
pressing.
caused enough trouble already.
You can give those to today's meeting. Commissioner Mejia, you got the last.
Okay, the registration for NACO conference for this, or later this summer has come out, as well as kind of like the proposed agenda. I'm not going to be attending that main session this year, but a lot of the topics, I thought had to do with, items that some of our program managers are working on, and I would like to provide that opportunity, especially if commissioners are not attending, provide those opportunities to our staff, but not knowing kind of where we are on the travel budget, but just wanted to put it out there. It's housing affordability, mental and behavioral health and justice, affordable broadband access, county economies and the county workforce, infrastructure, land use and resiliency, civic engagement, governance, and operations. So just with those topics, just thought that it might be useful for,
Where's the meeting gonna be?
it's gonna be in Tampa.
Tampa Bay,
It's gonna be super hot and
middle
swampy.
of July.
It's swampy and hot.
I'm out.
I don't even understand why they do that, but anyway, me too.
Inexpensive accommodations is what kind of drives, and conference space, so.
Yeah, so just kind of wanted to kind of let the board know and hopefully open the door up for staff to be able to attend that conference. Okay, that was it.
Okay, sounds like we're to the end. So we're back at 2 p.m. We're adjourned this morning. Thank you.